All right. Well, this is not the typical podcast, but welcome to the show. We've already had our podcast interview, and so if you haven't checked it out already and you want to learn all about Danny, please check out that episode. But today's course is actually going to be exploring a little bit about what it's like to be a working musician. And so, if you would like to kind of maybe give a brief overview of the various revenue streams that you've been able to figure out, and maybe we can go into each one a little bit more in depth.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Tyson, for having me back. It was
Sure.
a lot of fun being on your show last time and looking forward to this conversation. Um, and I'd like to start out by prefacing that, what I do is kind of personal to me as far as how I'm making music work as a profession for myself. I think a lot of people can do the things that I'm doing, but you just have to figure out what your skill sets are and really work at those. I also want to preface that I don't want to like hold myself as like the gold standard of success. There's plenty of musicians out there who have reached more fame than me, and which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, all sorts of higher levels of success and achievement. But I'm able to make a decent living doing what I'm doing, and I guess everyone gets to define success for themselves.
Yeah.
And stoked to be able to have a life at working as a musician and getting to do what I love.
I was hoping maybe to start a little bit towards the beginning. And, did you actually go to college with the intention of being, a professional working musician? Or, what was the point at which you decided to kind of follow this career path?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I did not go to college to pursue music. So I went back in 2000 to 2004. When I applied, I was a chem major, and that did not last too long. We had our orientation I went to UCSD, by the way. We had our orientation a little bit before school started, and over there we could pick our classes. And when I got there, I immediately undeclared. So I got in as the chem major, but I undeclared before school even started. And I was still thinking, I'll pursue some sort of biology or some sort of science track. My dad's a biologist, and I liked chemistry in high school, and just kind of thought like this is a good career
Mhm.
path. Like there's lots of opportunities for work in the sciences. However, I was playing music. I loved music. I had a keyboard in my dorm room. I joined, I forget if it was right at the beginning, but I think first quarter I took just like a music appreciation class on
Mhm.
African music and music of the African diaspora, and I loved that class.
Nice.
And that kind of um, made me want to enroll in more music classes, which I did. And by the third quarter at UCSD, I declared myself as a music major. At first, thought, like, all right, well, I don't want to be a starving musician. And in my head, I didn't really have any models for like what it's like to be a working musician.
Right.
So all I knew was either you're like world famous and you're multimillionaire, or you're like living on the streets. So that's kind of what I knew.
Right.
Just lack of exposure to working musicians. But I still wanted to do music. That's where my passion was.
Mhm.
And so I thought, all right, well, if I'm going to do music, maybe I can pursue a more academic route. And, I really liked music from Cuba and from Brazil. And, and I thought, okay, maybe I can be an ethnomusicologist.
Mm,
And so that was kind of my first thoughts. I can play, but I can also have some sort of university position.
right.
Um, and then little by little, like I really wanted to play, and I enjoy studying, different styles of music and all that, but I really don't love writing papers or, getting too deep into the academic stuff.
Right. Right.
To a certain level, it really interests me, but doing the work, I was kind of lazy about that. So, um, little by little, I kind of kept shifting over to wanting to become like a performing musician.
Right.
And, then I thought maybe I'll go into music and technology and I can maybe get into recording and have a studio, and, that can be an alternate source of
Hmm.
income. But I never at all pursued that. And it was just a thought. And, part of it was this ongoing conversation with my parents and kind of trying to keep them assured that, like, I'm going to figure out some way to make this work. But
Hmm.
deep down, I wanted to compose and perform. And so, as the years went on at UCSD, I started playing with people in San Diego and getting just more and more immersed into the jazz scene here. I also was taking private jazz lessons through UCSD with a guy named Kamau Kenyatta, and he was great in terms of mentorship. I forget if we talked about him last time, but he's like a great example of working musician who's got his
Mm.
fingers in a lot of things. He does producing. He produced a lot of Gregory Porter's albums. Um, he he was gigging, and I think he still is, um, and writing charts, kind of helping people produce albums in that way.
Hmm.
And he had the teaching gig at UCSD. So, he
So,
really
so that
like
was that was kind of your first role model into all the various
absolutely.
ways that you could actually become a working musician.
Yeah. And like uh I don't know how it is at other schools, but at least at the time at UCSD, they had all the classes there, but they had nothing in terms of like career, advising you on like how to
Right.
make a
Business
career of
development.
music.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I learned a lot of music theory. I learned a lot of music history. I got to play in ensembles and
Yeah.
connect with people like that. But as far as like what I did afterward, I had to kind of figure that
Yeah.
out on my own. So Kamal was like the one person there that was like, all right,
Nice.
you got to get nice clothes for when you do gigs. You got to get good equipment. All these like things that now seem so obvious.
Right. The
But
very like practical, actionable tips from the very beginning, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so is it safe to say that money wasn't the main motivating factor for you when choosing this career? I mean, it seems like you were really just more excited and passionate about playing and performing.
Yeah, the money part, I just kind of figured I would figure it out. And
Yeah,
part of that is, my privilege of coming from like a pretty well-off family, and having that support, and
sure.
just like I had that support system throughout college and
Right.
into, like I weaned off of it, eventually, but
Yeah.
like
But
I
I mean,
didn't.
I guess it's fairly common, right, for people who are excited or pursuing music that money usually isn't the driving factor. And so
Yeah, if
it's
it was, we
really
wouldn't.
it's really a challenge then to kind of learn all of the practical and business aspects of if you do want to actually pursue it as a career, right? And
Yeah.
so I totally appreciate you kind of acknowledging the fact that you weren't completely starving and on the street
Hmm.
and relying on busking for survival, but at the same
Yeah.
time you did have to kind of figure those things out. You did a little bit of busking when you were really young, and then
Hmm.
like you said, after meeting this other working musician, you had to kind of figure out like, what do I have to do in order to start making money, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what was kind of the first avenue that you pursued the most after college? Was it performing and gigging, or were you trying to do teaching, or kind of all the above?
Mostly performing and gigging,
Okay.
and that started. Let's see, in high school, like senior year of high school, I was working in a movie theater.
Hmm.
I think I quit that job probably like I forget if it was the summer before going to college or maybe right at the end of that summer. But for a very short time, I got a job at a place called La Jolla Music, and that was a horrible experience. The owner was not too kind to me, and maybe I just wasn't good at organizing the books or whatever. I remember she had me like dusting shelves and
Yeah.
all sorts of odd jobs that weren't fun.
Yeah.
And I was fired pretty soon, like in
Oh
two
no.
weeks. So yeah, that was okay. Um, but after that, I thought, all right, I still need to make money. At one point, I took like a little job, like working for these guys that sold pianos at Costco, and I thought, maybe like I could play the pianos and like entice people to come buy them, but I was pretty useless there. I'm not a salesperson. I suck at that. And I was like incredibly shy, so that didn't help
Mm,
either.
right.
So that didn't last long either. But what I eventually pursued was getting solo piano gigs at retirement homes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and this is something I would highly recommend to any musicians, especially if you play piano or a guitar or
Uh-huh.
something you can do on your own. They always need that entertainment, and they usually
Mm.
have a budget for it.
Hmm.
And so I just started like getting the whole San Diego circuit of retirement
And so,
homes.
what was the kind of first gig, and how did you make contact with them and develop a relationship and actually book that gig with them?
Um, I can't fully remember what the first gig was, but it may have been that my dad knew somebody who lived in one of them and
Oh,
kind
I
of helped
see.
me make that contact.
Right.
But eventually, I just started calling the places and letting them know, asking to speak to the um,
Yeah.
events coordinator and just
And
giving them
then
my info.
was there like an audition process, or did
No.
they kind of just like, yeah, if you want to play, come on over?
Yeah, I think it was more of that. If you want to play, come on
That's
over.
great. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really a neat kind of open mic equivalent, right? If you're
Hmm.
doing poetry or stand up or something,
Yeah.
being able to get reps in and perform in front of people while also getting paid, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like some places had pianos, sometimes I had to bring a keyboard. So I'm, starting to get used to that whole thing of like bringing equipment and
Right.
like, just kind of keeping track of what I needed to do for each gig,
Hmm.
taking down that information. And little by little, I'm also connecting with musicians. So
Hmm.
I met a conga player. I think maybe at a jam set. I forget. Could have been at one of the jam sessions.
Hmm.
Um, but we connected, and then he knew a bass player and a drummer, and so we formed this quartet. And like a couple times, one of the places like had me bring that quartet over to perform. So
Mm.
that was my first taste of like being a leader of a band and
Nice.
having like
Yeah. What
older
would you
musicians.
what would you maybe say to somebody who's looking to form a band, and aside from going to maybe jam sessions and just kind of networking, like how do you sort of develop the relationships with people that are maybe at a similar level or just above you maybe, and then actually get people to kind of commit to forming a band?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, like number one, you got to have your own stuff together, right? You
Right.
got to be like a good player. You got to be practicing all the time and developing
Hmm.
your craft and be somebody that other people want to play with. So I'd
Right.
say that's like number one.
Sure.
Um, but then beyond that, a lot of it is just kind of personal relationships and, just taking time to get to know people, going out and networking, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, and then the last part of it, if you're booking stuff on your own, is, just having like things that people want to do. So if you have paid work, it's a lot easier to get people to do it than if you say, hey, like, let's do this gig. It's good exposure.
Hmm.
Um, so,
Yeah, nothing incentivizes like a paid gig, right?
yeah, for sure. Now, if you have like-minded friends already and you're playing together and you're all kind of on the same page, then
Right.
that's another way. And,
Right.
I
Right.
think like for me, there was definitely like a mix of that happening with also like starting little by little to get like paid opportunities. And then I was able to call, people that were above my level
Right.
and start working with them. And yeah, so it's tricky.
Yeah. And so maybe kind of at a similar level as playing at a retirement home, would you say doing, restaurant gigs or playing at department stores, or, are those kind of similarly easy to book, or, is it kind of a challenge to get in given, there's
Mm.
probably established bands already at a lot of these places, right?
Yeah, yeah. The restaurants can be tricky. Um, a lot of that, I think, well, at least when you're beginning, it really helps to have some sort of demo material.
Mm.
And, when I was doing it, it was, burning a CD and putting, a headshot together and, maybe like writing up a one sheet piece of paper that had contact info, your business
Yeah.
card, and all that.
Yeah.
Um, Nowadays, everything's online, so
Sure.
I think videos are important to have. So, you need all that demo stuff. And then, yeah, reaching out to restaurants, some of them do have music regularly. So,
Hmm.
you could call those places. The
Right.
tricky part is not stepping on other people's toes if
Right.
they're already,
Right.
if
Yeah.
they have an established gig. So you'll see some places have like, the same band every Thursday night. And
Mm.
you would never want to like say like, hey, we'll do the gig for cheaper or whatever.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very, very
Frowned
bad thing to
upon.
do.
Yeah.
Undercutting your fellow musicians.
Yeah.
Um, but there's other places that just kind of like have a huge rotation and they have like different bands every night.
Right.
And so like a place like that might be a better place to
And then have
start.
you done many like corporate events, or I know you've
Yeah.
done a lot of private events, but kind of how do you get or break into that world?
Yeah. For me now, like actually for years, I haven't like ever put too much effort into getting them, but just from having been on the scene since like early 2000s, you get to know people. And so
Hmm.
like there's a fair amount of event planners that I've gotten to know. So I get calls from
Hmm.
them. And having gone to UCSD, like my name's on the UCSD musician referral list. So sometimes I'll get calls from that. You can always put out ads on Yelp or there's other services. Gig Masters was one that I used to use. You have to
Oh,
pay to
interesting.
be on there, but then like, you get bids for events or trying to remember the name. There's another one like that that even now I still get inquiries every now and then. And again, you
Hmm.
have to bid. You're going up against several bands, so they have to like your music and they have to like your whatever you're bidding.
Hmm.
it's a mix of that.
Yeah.
Um, then there's another one called Gig Town, which is an app that a guy in San Diego named Andy Altman originally developed, and I think he sold the company, but it's a really cool app, and it's just another like booking service, and you can get restaurant gigs on there, and there's corporate events that again you get these. You'll get a notification like this person's looking for a calypso band
Oh,
on
nice. Yeah.
Monday, whatever, from this time to that time, and
Yeah.
if you are that, you can say, hey, I'm a calypso band, I can do it.
Yeah.
So all sorts of different ways to do it. My path was to a large extent, like I kind of headed up, like doing a lot of bookings.
Hmm.
I was very shy, like I never would like well, I guess at some point I cold called all the retirement homes, but
Hmm.
like I wouldn't cold call restaurants, or like I'd barely ever do that. But like just somehow, I just started getting to know people and getting calls. And so a lot of the work I did was kind of as a leader,
Hmm.
which was great because, it allowed me to call the people I wanted to call because I had, these gigs that I can offer them. And a lot of the private gigs led to, like kind of getting a vibe as a band and kind of using that almost as like experience to move more toward the playing concerts, which
Mm.
is really always like the main goal for me.
Right.
Um, the private events, they can be fun. It's nice to just have this low stakes playing environment where we can try things,
Hmm.
and it's good for making money.
Hmm.
But yeah, the goal for me is really like making art and like composing and playing my music and
Right.
playing jazz standards and all that and performing concerts.
So yeah, what was the transition like from doing these smaller gigs and private events and to finally being able to perform your own stuff and book concerts and gigs in that regard?
It was kind of gradual. In my first year of college, I got connected with this Argentinian conga player, and at that point, I was like all about Afro-Cuban music, and he
Hmm.
was totally into it too. And so it was a really good connection. He had a band. He was having drama with his pianist, so it was kind of like a perfect time for us to connect.
You swooped
And
in.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and so we formed a band. We called it Calzone, like California, and then son is like a style of music from Cuba.
Mm.
And yeah, we formed the band, and we had this weekly gig at a place called Calypso Cafe, which has since burned down.
Oh no.
Yeah, but yeah, it was every Friday night, and so like that was like first I started learning his music, but little by
Mm.
little I started composing some songs and arranging, like bringing in arrangements of stuff by pianist named Chucho Valdez and like other pianists, and that's what I started getting really interested in doing was
Hmm.
like my own music and then these arrangements of pieces by artists that I liked a lot.
Nice.
Um, so I mean that was basically it's a restaurant, but it was a performance. So
Right.
like that was my first time doing that. And then there's a club down here called Dizzy's, which maybe you've been to, I forget.
Hmm.
But when I was pretty young, like I asked Chuck Perrin, who runs it, if I could put on a concert, and he allowed me to do that, which was awesome.
Nice.
Like he didn't have to say yes, but I remember, I called a guy named Rob Thorson, who's a great bass player in town, and he was also the neighbor of my best friend. And, that was like my first time getting to hire him, which was a big deal for me. And
Hmm.
I forget who else I had, but, again, like we kind of put together some of my stuff. So little
Yeah.
by little, I started
Nice.
like having performance opportunities. And then there was like every quarter at UCSD, there was an opportunity, like a student concert soiree that they would have. So,
Hmm.
it was like put together a band and play a song or two for that.
Got it.
So
So when
yeah.
you're starting out, I'm assuming obviously the more musicians you have, the more you got to pay each musician, and so the profits from that gig get spread out.
Hmm.
But you're trying to also balance this marketability of bringing in a trio or like a horn section or something, right? And so
Yeah.
are you kind of maybe losing money on some of these gigs because you're trying to just get exposure, or are you kind of just doing it so that you can get some reps in, but also pay everybody else a good wage so that they'll want to perform with you again? Like how does the economics of that work out?
Huh. Well, I don't think I ever. Well, I probably did a few free gigs here and there, but in general, there's always some budget. But I
Yeah.
mean, it was pretty low, like, when I started, and over time it's gotten better.
Hmm. But then
Yeah.
are you able to negotiate at all, or is it kind of just whatever budget they have, and then depending on your level and your notoriety, right, then they'll
Hmm.
be able to pay you more, right?
Yeah, there definitely comes a time when, once you get some of that notoriety, um, you know, I, I don't know if it's a matter of just feeling more comfortable to ask for more,
Hmm.
and people all along would have been willing to pay more, or um, or if it is, just, like being able to say, you know, whatever my accomplishments are, and people really want that, and
Right.
so we're able to get more.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm assuming the more experience and just I guess notoriety you have, the bigger venues or the more desirable venues you can start going after, right?
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I mean, we can get in, like we've kind of covered like some of the early beginnings for me,
Right.
and it's been like, over 20 years of doing this.
Yeah.
Um, so since 2014 or 13 or so, I've been working with a booking agent named Marion Leibowitz.
How did you get connected with a booking agent, and how would people go about trying to do that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and a lot of it has to do with being in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
I know there's some formula, maybe you've heard it on other podcasts about luck, like it. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, it's when
It's like hard work.
preparation meets opportunity or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not like just I just happened to be in the right place, like
Right.
she saw what I was doing and also liked what I had done, and she had,
Hmm.
gone over, looked at my website, and, just kind of like all my reviews and things like that I'd worked for years to get. So it wasn't just like meeting her and having a shiny personality that did it all.
It doesn't hurt
But
though, Danny, right?
what?
I said your shiny personality doesn't hurt.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like, uh, just for anybody, like
Yeah,
a lot of this whole business is about personal connections. So, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, you definitely have to work on that aspect, or at least keep it in mind as you're building relationships. But
Yeah.
and it has to be sincere. You can't just be like trying to put
Sure.
on like a persona just to get stuff from people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Mary and I connected, and at the time, she was a professor at San Diego State University. I had just completed my master's program when I met her, so
Hmm.
unfortunately, I never got to take any of her courses.
Mm.
She was a clarinetist and kind of migrated into music business, and so a lot of her courses were teaching those things that I wish I had gotten when I was an undergrad student, learning how to like do all these things, like build your demo, like put your band together, get a
Nice.
website, what should be on that website, how do you reach
Yeah.
out to places, all
Hmm.
that, and so she's total expert at that.
Mm.
And when we met, she was booking stuff through San Diego State. So she
Got
had a
it.
program called the Adams, not the Adams Family, I think the Adams Project, the Adams Project, and so like basically like she would book a mix of performances
Uh-huh.
like at libraries and as well as sometimes she also had this grant called Heart Power Performances. It was through the National Endowment of the Arts,
Hmm.
and the grant was to put music in places that need it, like
Oh, nice.
retirement homes or veterans homes,
Hmm.
or one of the most interesting gigs we did, and we did it several times, was playing in a jail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it
Like,
was for a module of like veterans who,
nice.
I think probably most of them it was like drug related crimes or uh,
Hmm.
I don't really know. But man, that was like really meaningful experience playing for
Hmm.
them, and just a cool opportunity. And
Wow.
man, when you walk past those doors and you hear them slam,
Yeah.
it's pretty intense. Like
Wow.
just being there, and like I know I'm gonna leave when I'm done, but
Yeah.
just imagining if I had to be there for like years at a time.
What were you playing for them mostly? Was this at a point when you were playing your own material or
Yeah, I
standards or
think I want to say every time we did it was with the group LP and the Vinyl. So
okay.
yeah, with vocalist Leonard Patton. Sometimes we had different bass players than, like Justin didn't do all of them, but so we
Hmm.
mixed a little bit. But
Yeah.
that was generally the band that she would book for that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, uh, she retired from San Diego State University and formed her own agency called the Marion Leibowitz Booking Agency,
Hmm.
and like got a roster full of excellent musicians in a lot of different genres. So
Nice.
like I'm on kind of the jazz side of
Right.
things, but she has a mariachi group, more like chamber groups, and
Right.
just like a wide variety. And
Yeah.
she's become extremely successful booking all these groups, like touring all over the country and playing
Hmm.
like really, big performance venues. So
Right.
yeah.
So, do you have other members of your team that help manage and book your gigs? Do you have a manager, or
Mm,
do you have? I know your wife has also been very involved with helping your career, and so what
yeah.
other kind of components are there to consider besides a booking agent?
Yeah. So there's the distinction of booking agent versus manager.
Hmm.
And Marion serves kind of as both. I mean, she books the gigs, but she does like to, offer a lot of career advice and
Hmm.
give us ideas for new directions to explore, which is more of the manager side.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to remember there was a conference I used to go to in New York, and there was a panel all about booking agents versus managers, and
Hmm.
their very simple definition was managers get paid before the gig, booking agents get paid after. But
When do the musicians get paid?
yeah, I don't know. I guess the musicians are paying their manager, whereas the booking agents are booking the gigs and they're taking the cuts and
Yeah.
paying
But
the
then
musicians.
you're often not getting paid for, a few weeks after a gig, right?
Not too often. Usually,
Okay.
usually we're getting paid up front.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's, like some of the corporate booking
Hmm.
agencies like sometimes have like a net 30-day policy.
Hmm.
And then like if I play gigs for UCSD or San Diego State University, like sometimes their payment system takes a while.
Right.
Um, But most of the performances we do, it's paid either, like a deposit first and then final payment
Hmm.
either the day of or before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for in risk of getting a little bit too much in the weeds, but I think might be just useful as a kind of brief overview. Like, how have you kind of set up your own business? Are you LLC, sole proprietor? How did you kind of handle all of the transactional side of being a working musician?
Yeah, I've always done it as just a sole proprietor.
Uh-huh.
Um, and basically like the way it works, like if I'm getting a gig, then I'm keeping track of that income, and then
Hmm.
I'll pay the musicians out. And let's say I work with musician X,
Hmm.
number of times over the year, and as long as I pay musician X 600 or more dollars, then I send them a 1099 at the
Got
end of
it.
the year.
Got it.
Yeah, so I'm declaring all my income, but then I'm deducting whatever I've paid out.
Right. So
So
that's pretty straightforward then in terms of what you actually have to manage.
it is, but it's not. It wasn't like obvious to me when I
Right.
first started doing it.
Right.
So what I do is I keep spreadsheets of all my income. I'll
Hmm.
kind of categorize it like I have teaching income, and then I have gig income, I have recording income. So if someone calls me to record on their CD, I
Hmm.
have transcribing income. So if or I call it arranging, if I'm writing sheet music for people, which is something I do quite a lot of, then I have that category. And
Hmm.
then W-2 income. So like every summer I teach at a jazz workshop, and that would be a W-2 gig.
Right. Right.
So that's separate. And then there's the royalty income from
Right.
CDs.
Got it.
So when it comes time to taxes, like the royalty is kind of in its own category, the W-2 is in its own category, but then all those other things where I'm getting checks from
Hmm.
students or Venmo payments, or if I'm getting, like clients are sending me payments, that's like all the stuff that I have to keep track of, and then
Hmm.
keep track of the money going out. So I have another spreadsheet for how much I paid every musician throughout the year.
What are maybe some of the other external costs that maybe you wouldn't necessarily anticipate? Obviously you're kind of upgrading equipment. You have to pay for travel and your vehicle and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other expenses that you hadn't really anticipated initially?
Let's see, there's tuning my piano, which I
Yeah.
should probably do more often. But whatever instrument you play, if you play
Yeah.
bass, you might need to buy new bass strings or get repairs if it
Yeah.
cracks, or whatever instrument you have has associated costs. Um, what else? There's fees associated with getting representation. So like
Hmm.
Marion goes to all these booking conferences throughout the year. Or there's usually like a season from about like August or September through January where she goes to these.
Hmm.
And so like all the artists on her roster contribute to
Right.
her going there, and taking time to go there and paying the conference fees, which cost a good amount.
Uh-huh.
Every now and then we'll do showcases at these conferences, and so there's more fees involved in doing these showcases. Um, the whole purpose of these conferences again is booking. So she's
Yeah.
there trying to sell all the artists to presenters who are booking their seasons. And if we can actually go to these conferences and perform, that puts us right in front of them, and it increases our chances of getting booked. Um, so that's definitely like an expense. Um, for a number of years, I was part of the musicians union, which
Mm.
I'm not a part of anymore because I just never have any gigs that require it.
And
But
that's more for like recording artists and stuff like that.
yeah, well, the union is really strong for like if you're in the orchestra,
Oh, I
symphony
see.
orchestra, like
Yeah.
that's a union gig. or not all, but a lot of the theater shows would be union gigs. And yeah, if you like if I'm recording on someone's album, that's not going to be a union gig. But
Hmm.
if I lived in LA and like recorded for movie studios, a lot of times like that might be union gigs as well.
Hmm.
So I just don't, I got a couple calls to play with the symphony orchestra. I was able to skate by on one of those without being part of the union,
Hmm.
but it was only one that I could do. And then
Right.
there was one other gig I did with them, but they hired me kind of like as a special guest artist rather than like to be part of the whole orchestra.
Got it.
So let's see, I'm trying to think of what other expenses. I mean, you could buy equipment insurance if you want.
Right.
Another new one, I mean, it's not so new, but I finally cracked and bought it, was liability insurance.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of venues require you to have that, like especially like if you play at a hotel, like they might want you to have liability insurance.
Hmm.
Um, or like we do a lot of school presentations, and some of them require liability insurance. And
Hmm.
for the first time ever, um, there was a school that I played at that required molestation liability
Oh,
insurance.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like super, super expensive, but luckily the school covered the cost of
Okay.
buying it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so insurance is definitely an expense.
Hmm.
Gas, just getting from
Yeah.
place to
I mean,
place.
just like vehicle maintenance, all that stuff, right? Especially if
Yeah,
you're going on tour.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then as far as like equipment, I mean, I have my keyboard and my amplifier, but like, as I started doing some bigger gigs, like it became like good for me to have a PA system, so I had to buy speakers and a mixer and
Hmm.
amplifier for that, and microphones, and like when you're leading a band, like you just have to have like some of these things. So
Yeah.
there's that computer equipment, like you like have to buy. Well, you don't have to, but like for me, I do a lot of music ranging, so
Hmm.
computer software to do that, video editing software,
Hmm.
um, and what else?
Yeah. Maybe also a little bit of a tangent, but what are 5 tools or programs that you use most consistently for running the business? You said you're doing a number of spreadsheets for tracking income and expenses. Are you just using the QuickBooks? Are you just using Google Docs? Like, what kind of actual software are you using for these things?
Yeah, for that, I mean, it's very simple, just a spreadsheet I created on page, or no, what's it called? Numbers. It's
Hmm. The
the
Mac.
or the
Yeah,
Apple version of
got it.
Excel.
And then for teaching or writing arrangements or editing, like what kind of software programs are you using for that?
I use Sibelius
Okay,
for all my arranging. Some people use a program called Finale.
that's right.
I have an old box of Finale that I bought like back in the early 2000s, and I just never got good at it. Everyone always says the learning curve is a lot more difficult for Finale than Sibelius,
Mm-hmm.
but they're both great programs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some other ones too. There's a free one called MuseScore that you can
Oh, there.
you know but yeah, that's like the program that I use the most, and that I feel like I've kind of like reached. That's the only program I feel like an expert at. Like I can do
Yeah,
absolutely everything I want to do on there and do it very quickly. I know all the shortcuts.
nice. And is that
um
subscription based?
it is now,
Yeah,
even though I think maybe you can buy it outright, but I'm like all the way back on version 7. I forget what version they're at now. Um, but I it does everything I need. So there's just
yeah,
until I need to buy a new computer, I'm just gonna keep
yeah,
running with this one.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
everything has converted to subscription, even if it didn't need to. So it's good that
yeah,
you have the
I know,
ability to use the old one.
totally.
Yeah.
So Transcribe is another program I use. It's maybe like a $40 program,
Hmm.
and it's basically like an MP3 player. but it allows you to start and stop the file like just from the same place each time.
Mm.
Like if you're on iTunes and you're trying to transcribe, like which for, those of you who don't know what I'm talking about means like I'm listening to music and putting it into notation. I'm writing down what I'm hearing.
Hmm.
Um, so, if I hear a phrase, I might miss something and I want to go back. On iTunes, you try to scroll the thing and you've gone back like 10 extra seconds.
Right.
And that's such a pain having to listen to those extra 10 seconds. So that's one of the functions of transcribe. The other
Hmm.
is that you can slow down the music. And that's really cool, being able to slow down the music, because
Hmm.
if it's a difficult phrase, it helps to hear it slower.
Yeah.
You can change the key if you want to change the key. You can equalize it. So there's all sorts of things you could do with that. So that's a tool that I use all the time.
Nice.
Um, what else? Logic. I don't use too much, but every now and then, if like I've done a couple of recordings where I've done my own mixing, and I
Hmm.
really, really don't know hardly anything about that. So
Hmm.
more often than not, I will not do that. But every now and then, like, I'll play a gig somewhere and they'll give me all the files of the individual tracks, and I'll just do a very rough mix of it, and I can do some basic editing.
Hmm.
I also used it during lockdown days to make some videos, just kind of like we did some remote recording where me and the guys in the band each recorded from our homes and put that together. So I
Hmm.
used Logic for the audio, and then what's the other one? Is that Final Cut now? Yeah, Final Cut Pro.
Hmm.
Um, which is video editing software. So I used that one quite often, either for like putting multiple camera angles together into one video, um, or even like if I just have like a single camera angle, like I might use it to just put title sequence on there and stuff like
Hmm.
that and upload it to YouTube.
Are
Um,
you using Zoom or some other video conferencing software to teach virtually?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Zoom is what I use for the most part for this, and it's took me a while to get it going. Like as you can see, I have my well, if I move, you can see my microphone, and over there, that always I have a mixing board, and I have a keyboard over there, and everything is kind of like going through the mixing board into my computer, so I'm able to get good audio. Because one of the pains about Zoom is that it's more geared toward speech, and
Hmm.
so with music, a lot of times Zoom will cut out the audio. So if
Mm.
like we were talking on iPads, for instance, and I was playing, you might
Hmm.
not hear anything at all, which is
Right.
really hard. So I want to make sure my students can hear me well. Same with like if I play recordings, that's going through the mix from my computer to the mixer and back in,
Got
so
it.
that they can hear it clearly. The hard
Nice.
part is like the students, and some of
Yeah.
them like have done kind of similar things to me and gotten that going. And that makes teaching great.
Mhm.
Sometimes I can't hear them, and there's settings that make it better, but
Yeah.
they don't exist if you're running on a phone or an iPad.
Yeah. Well, maybe
But the
that's
other,
a. Oh, go ahead.
last thing I was going to say is the share screen ability
Mm.
capability. A lot of times I'll be sharing the screen with Sibelius, the notation software, and
Mm.
as I'm teaching, I can notate ideas and or pull up PDFs that I've created.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say it might be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the teaching arena of what it means to be a working musician. And so, maybe how did you get your start teaching private lessons, and what other aspects of teaching do you do? And then maybe we can give some advice or guidelines on how to do that more efficiently and effectively.
All right. Well, like everything, it was gradual. I had like
Yeah.
only one student at first for I had no clue how I met her. Um, but I would go over to her house and I'd work with her and I don't know, just over the years, people approached me and asked for lessons, and so it became a thing that I started doing. Learning how to teach is a whole thing, right? Like, just because you know how to play doesn't mean you necessarily know how to teach.
Right.
Um, so, it was just kind of like a number of years figuring out like how to convey knowledge and how to get students growing,
Yeah.
basically, how to
Did
accelerate.
did you find any good resources in that regard? Books, online stuff, or just kind of trial and error over the years?
More trial and error for me. I
Yeah.
think a lot of colleges have music pedagogy
Right.
degrees, so I definitely could have gone that route and probably even still benefited
Hmm.
today, like if I had done that. Um, but most of the teaching that I've done has been like a mix of intuition and just from having learned from great teachers,
Right.
so it's kind of copying what they
Right.
did for me.
Yeah.
Um,
What are maybe like one or two things that you um, would encourage or say that you value in terms of what it means to be an effective teacher?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that every student is different, and you have to be very tuned into your students and what they're looking for, what their goals are. That's
Hmm.
usually one of the first questions when I meet a new student. I'll get to know first about maybe their music background, but then like, why are you here? What do you want to learn? And that helps me get an idea. Um, I've come to know that, certain people are doing it as a hobby
Hmm.
and they are terrified of playing in front of other people.
Hmm.
And, they have all sorts of other things going on in their life. And, they just enjoy coming over for lessons and they love music and they want to get better at it. But
Hmm.
they're not like looking to get into Juilliard necessarily.
Hmm.
So lessons for them might look like one thing versus lessons for a high school kid who's gung ho on getting into Juilliard or Manhattan School of Music or,
Hmm.
Berkeley School of Music or wherever. For them, it would be like a lot more of a strict path of like, all right, these are the things you need to get down.
Right.
And a lot of that has been kind of shaped by my teacher. Well, I guess both of them, like Kamal Kenyatta, who I mentioned earlier, Rick Helzer is another one who um, I model a lot of my teaching after the way he taught me jazz. But I also took classical piano lessons, and so I have some students who want to study classical, and I love
Hmm.
working on that too. So, a lot of things there are also modeled after things I've picked up from my classical teachers as well as like I'm always like interested in learning more. So,
Yeah.
I'm listening to interviews with musicians all the time and always trying to like get put that into my teaching.
Hmm.
Those are kind of the main sources of like input
Right.
for what goes out to my students.
So you're doing private lessons as well as clinics
Mm,
and camps and assemblies,
yes.
and I would imagine it's a very similar process to performing and gigging. You're slowly just building networks and putting the word out and getting a reputation as a teacher as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like with gigs, like there's websites you can advertise on, like Yelp, and there was another one called Thumbtack, which helped me get a number of private students. And then what else? Word of mouth, or sometimes at shows, someone will come up to me and ask me for lessons,
Hmm.
or they may have like just heard my music on streaming and they might connect in that way. But then the opportunities beyond that, there's like I've done college teaching and again, like it's who you know. And like I knew, uh, I guess I've taught at several colleges. Um, but a guy named Derek Cannon teaches at a place called Grossmont College, and so like we had played together off and on throughout the years, and he pulled me in to teach some classes over at Grossmont College. So there's that. I mentioned the bass player Rod Thorson, who I called for one of my first gigs at Dizzy's, and he got approached by an organization called the Athenaeum Music and Arts Library back in
Mm.
2013 to put together a grant funded program to go to elementary schools throughout San Diego. So we've been doing that ever since then. And when my agent books us on tour, oftentimes there's an educational component to a lot of the shows. So, we'll play at night, and then the next day we'll visit like a local community college, or we'll do an assembly at an elementary school or high school or
Yeah.
middle school.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've done residencies that, like we're in one place for a week and we're going to like all the schools. And a lot of times they are like super rural communities.
Right.
And yeah, that's like a really cool thing. So
What
yeah,
would
just
you
different
what
ways to.
would you maybe identify as some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered in the realm of teaching?
I guess one challenge for me is that I'm very laid back.
Hmm.
And I think some students might thrive more from like a teacher that like maybe not full on chews them out the next week if they haven't practiced, but like
Yeah.
really like holds them to the fire. And
Yeah.
that's just not me. Like
Yeah.
I, I'm more like, if you want to learn this stuff, great, I will show you. If you don't, I'm happy to hang out still. And we can
Yeah.
always practice in the lesson instead of work on new stuff.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me.
Sounds like you need to watch Whiplash a couple more times.
Yeah, exactly. um, and then like I'm also, like I said, I never went through the music pedagogy programs, but having seen like my kids take lessons, and their teacher is very organized about producing a lesson sheet every week and kind of having the kids keep track of how their practice went throughout the week. And
Hmm.
like some of those tools I'm just like so lazy about following through and doing.
Yeah.
So every now and then well, not every now and then, like now I'm really trying to like email at the end of a lesson, like here's the lesson assignment, here's what to work on this week.
Yeah.
And that really helps. But for a long time I was just kind of going with the flow, which works for some and doesn't work for others.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, there's always room for improvement in any of these fields, right? And you're kind of doing the best you can in each one and slowly learning new tips and tricks to make yourself a little bit better and more effective. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, we've kind of covered the performing aspect and the teaching aspect, and it feels like there's maybe two more areas that you kind of split your time between, and that's recording albums and then also writing charts. So maybe we can talk a little bit about recording albums, and with that comes a little bit of touring. I guess that falls under performing as well, but yeah, what's the album recording process like for you, and how do you kind of allocate your energy towards that?
Yeah, so that's definitely like a big topic, and it's one that I'm trying to still figure out
Yeah.
because things have changed a lot with streaming.
Yeah.
You can still sell albums, people still buy them at concerts, but most people don't listen to music that way anymore. As far as monetizing recordings, right now I'm like not quite sure how to
Yeah.
do that.
It
And
seems very up in the air in terms of if it's even worth the hassle of recording an album, right?
yeah, totally. Now I think the one counter thought to it might be like, okay, maybe recording albums, maybe money isn't the main goal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe recording albums can be more used toward, attracting those concert opportunities and
Right.
putting yourself out there. And,
It's like a calling card.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
so looking at it that way takes off the stress of only doing it if if you're gonna break even or make money on it, because
sure.
it's just not the reality anymore. It's
But
really
even if you're going to stream, say like on one of the platforms, you still need to go into the recording studio and
hmm.
do the mastering and all that. So, maybe it's less about creating physical copies, but you still kind of have to go through the entire process of producing an album, right?
Yeah, you do.
Maybe we can start with your very first album. And I know, like you said, things have changed a lot, but just in terms of getting the studio time, hiring the musicians, like the initial investment costs, like how did you kind of approach all of that and tackle this daunting task of producing an album?
Yeah, so it was just, had savings and invested into it and booked the studio time. You have to pay for the studio. I wanted to pay the musicians a fair wage too, so
Mm-hmm.
just had to like allocate money for that. And then like, before you do all that, you want to have a vision in
Material.
mind of what you're creating. Like the
Yeah,
worst thing you can do is go into the studio and not know what songs you want to play or
right.
not have them rehearsed. And so you're like handing out your parts at the recording session and wasting all that time because you're
Yeah,
paying for that time. So that's like a big part of recording is just
yeah,
having the whole concept in mind. Of
yeah.
course, you can be flexible once you're there, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's where some of the magic happens.
Right.
Um, but that's step one, and then step two, like once you've recorded everything, is picking out which takes you want to use, doing the edits and doing the mixing, and then
Mm-hmm.
doing the mastering, and then comes like figuring out artwork, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a whole other challenge, and then coming up with liner notes, which
Yeah.
I'm one of the slowest writers ever. I just want to get it like perfect.
Which
You
might
know,
now
it's
be a benefit of not having to create physical albums, right?
That's true, but I still feel like you kind of need to do the physical album,
Yeah.
and the reason is because a lot of the radio stations still
Uh,
require physical,
oh, I didn't
as
know
well
that.
as the reviewers, and so
Is
that's
it
another thing
just
I want.
because they want a level of legitimacy?
I don't know. I I've been to a radio conference,
Mhm.
jazz radio, and they have these very like I don't want to say heated debates, but conversations where they're all trying to come to this consensus of, all right, it's 2023. Uh, can we finally all move to digital?
Yeah.
And I only went 1 year, but apparently they have conversation every year. And I mean, it's been a number of years. Maybe some of the stations have converted over, but
Yeah.
um, there's certain information that is embedded in the CDs, and there's a way to do it digitally as well. But that helps like the performance rights organizations track where to
Got
send
it.
royalties, and
Yeah.
there's all this technical stuff that I don't
Yeah.
even fully understand. So a lot of these places have like such huge catalogs of CDs already, and
Hmm.
so they just want to keep that going, and
That makes sense.
it
Yeah.
just take too long to convert over. Some
Yeah.
have converted.
So
But
for
for that reason, like my feeling is, if I want to record an album, one purpose it could serve is, just kind of taking a picture of where I am at as an artist
mm,
at a particular time. And that's important. I'm not going to play the pieces that I'm playing now, like in 10 years. I might be sick
right.
of them by then. So there's that. But then, like, from a business standpoint, what do you want to do with your album? Do you want to just have it out there and do nothing with it? Or do you want to try to get exposure with it? And if you
Hmm.
do want to do that, then you want to get it out to reviewers. And there's there's plenty of really great press campaign managers
Mm,
out there, and I've
hmm.
worked with, I guess, the same one every time, a lady named Anne Braithwaite, who's amazing,
Nice.
and then there's radio campaign managers, And
Yeah.
so, you put it out, you give it to them. Each one of them requires like 200 to 300 CDs, so that's
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, let's say like 500 to 600 CDs that you print just to mail everywhere. And,
Mm,
maybe you get 20 reviews for the 200 CDs you've mailed everywhere.
wow. Yeah.
That's another expense, by the way, mailing stuff.
Yeah,
um,
I'd love to talk about the marketing of the album and all that, but maybe just quickly, just a step back. I'm super curious about actually the recording process.
mm.
Um, when you're going in to record an album, how many songs are you kind of coming in with, and is there an understanding that some of those are going to get cut, or are you just like, I'm coming in with 10 songs, those are the 10 songs, we're going to do multiple takes of those 10 songs? Like, how does that work in your mind?
For me, it's been the latter. Like, I know
Yeah,
exactly what I want to record. We've been playing the songs as a band.
got it.
Some of them, I put albums out in 2008, and then 2012, 14, 16, and 18,
Mm-hmm.
and then 2020.
Nice.
And I haven't recorded since, but I want to. Um, but we'd record an album, like that would be the latest stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
But in between recording the album and releasing, it could take like a good year.
Okay.
Um, and it doesn't have to take that long, but it just kind of does, like
Mm-hmm.
the mixing process could take a few weeks. The mastering that could take a day, doesn't take too long, but
Mm-hmm.
just scheduling that date, everything just every email can like sometimes be a few days, as you know.
Yeah.
So time just kind of does that. And then getting the artwork, or you might like have your product and then shop for a label. So by the time like the CD is finally out there, like I've already written new music. So,
Yeah.
then we're like, we have a whole new crop of tunes. So yeah, when I'm recording, like we already have it.
Right.
Some bands though, like the Beatles, for instance, like if you watch the Get Back documentary, you'll see they're in the studio writing
Right. Right.
songs there. So I don't have the budget to sit in the studio and compose stuff and do that, but
Well,
that would
that, I
be
mean, I
cool.
guess that was my next question, is what's a typical studio session? Is this one day you're able to kind of lay down the whole album, or does it take multiple days?
Um, Usually we've done it in about 2 days, I want to
Got it.
say. Um, yeah, like I'd say 5 or 6 songs per day is a good amount. When I started recording with my trio, we were playing some really complicated music, and so some of the songs would take like 10 takes to get.
Mm,
And since then, my compositional style has changed, and some of the music is complex, some of it is
mhm.
more simple, but for whatever reason, it just feels easier to play, and it's a lot more about like having those open sections of improv. So we're able to get it in maybe like 3 or 4 takes, or sometimes one or two.
Yeah.
Um, so that process goes a lot quicker. That's for my stuff.
Right.
I record also, like I get hired to record for other people's projects, and work a lot at Peter Sprague's studio. He's a
Hmm.
guitarist that uh, awesome guitarist, and he runs a studio. And with him, a lot of the sessions are like, a simple jazz song, and I might not even take a solo on it. I might just be accompanying. A lot of times it might be for a singer, and we can usually get stuff done within 1 or 2 takes
Nice.
for that. And then we have like punching capabilities. So if I messed up, a note here, we don't have to do the whole thing again. I could just fix that one section.
Got it. And
Um,
how did you go about finding a recording studio and the audio engineers and, the final mastering? Like, what was that process like? Is it all like an all-in-one package once you find a studio, or are you able to kind of mix and match the people that you want working on the album?
yeah, initially, way back in the day, it was like I heard from another musician about a studio, and I went there and recorded, and the guy did the mixing, and then he sent it somewhere in the Midwest to get mastered, and
Mm.
so it was just people telling me that.
Right.
Then I've done some recording over at Peter Sprague's, who I had this long time relationship with. But then for some of my albums, I've recorded up in Los Angeles at a studio that a fellow pianist named Josh Nelson recommended, called Tritone Recording. And the piano there is one of my favorite pianos to play.
Nice.
And so that's why I keep going back there. And the engineer, Tally Sherwood, is just an incredible engineer. Both him and Peter Sprague are like a joy to work with. Like
Mm.
they know music very well, extremely well, and that helps
Hmm.
if you're working with an engineer who's not like with you on the music, and you say I want to go back to this section and they have no clue, then they're taking forever to find it, and then they're figuring out how to punch because they don't know how to do that.
Right.
So yeah, that's a huge thing, just having a good
Yeah.
engineer.
Are you working with a record label, or are you kind of just doing this
Mm.
independently?
Man, you have so many good questions. um,
I just don't know anything about it, so it's really fascinating to me, actually.
yeah. Yeah. So I've been on a recording label called Origin Records for ever since my 2014 release.
Hmm.
And I was on a different label for the previous one and a different label for the previous one.
Mm.
Every label has their own setup, and labels are pretty different now from how they used to be, I think. I mean, there's probably some that have like record deals for people, like maybe Blue Note,
Hmm.
or some of the like really, really biggest ones. But the way the label I'm on, Origin, is structured is basically like I pay them to be on their label.
Hmm.
Um, per project. It's not like a yearly fee or anything, right? Like
Hmm.
um, they'll charge me an amount, and that amount includes them doing the artwork for my CD, and then taking care of the printing of the CDs. And they have their whole network of radio and people and reviewers, and they'll
Mm.
send CDs out to those, unless I decide to hire my own publicist and
Right.
radio people.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing that the label does. The other thing is that these radio stations receive dozens of CDs like every week,
Hmm.
and most packages just go straight to the trash can.
Right.
So if your package has Origin,
Right.
you know, on it, then they're more like they Origin has taken the time over the years to go to
Yeah.
these conferences with publicists and or well, both publicists and radio stations and reviewers, and make
Hmm.
those relationships. So
Yeah. And
just
then,
everything, it's all about relationships.
yeah. How difficult is it to actually sign with one of these labels? I know, I mean, I know you're paying them, but I'm sure they have some type of curation process, right?
Yeah, like that's where it's at, is really like they have to be into what you're doing.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes tenacity reaching out to them, and
Hmm.
like a week later, like just following up. Did you get my message? I'd love to
Hmm.
talk to you about this. There were a lot of labels I reached out to that I never heard back from.
Hmm.
I have a friend who's used a lawyer to reach out on her behalf for labels. So there's different ways to do it, and it's kind of like a mix of what you have to offer
Yeah.
and also just how good you are at getting their attention.
Yeah. I mean, having this conversation, it's very clear to me that you've had to become very competent and good at so many different things in each area of, being a working musician. And so
Yeah.
part of it is I don't want it to seem overwhelming or daunting for other people. But I also think it's very helpful to understand like what it takes to run a business as a musician, and
Mm-hmm.
these are all different streams that you've been able to develop over the years. And it's like a lot of overlap as well, in terms of the relationships and the skills, and
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, maybe what would you say to somebody who's listening to this and they're like, oh, I just want to play music. This sounds way too complicated or
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Well, I would stress, the thing I said right at the top of our conversation, which was, that this is kind of my own personal path, and that
Yeah,
there's lots of other paths, and some people like don't do all these things, and they get really good at one thing,
yeah,
and they're able to make their living doing that one thing,
right.
and and the other thing is, like I said at the top, is that this works for me. Like I've achieved, I'm not the gold standard of
Right.
like, what success is in music, but it works for me.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would stress is that, I mean, like for me, I've been doing this for like over 20 years. Nothing happened overnight,
Right.
and it's just taken a long time. But luckily, my expenses were a lot less than they are now. Like I
Yeah.
lived with roommates when I started doing this, and
Right. Right.
rent was like next to nothing. Now I'm supporting a family, and so
Yeah.
it's like I guess like your life, what your expenses are, and what the reality of your situation is,
Hmm.
to some extent governs like how motivated you are to like what you need to do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Luckily, my passion coincides with it, so I love doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I just saw this saying about how hustle beats talent, especially when talent doesn't hustle, right? um, yeah, and I also really appreciate you acknowledging like this is your personal path, and there's so many other ways to go about making a living doing music.
Yeah.
And also, it's just kind of everybody is at where they are at, and you kind of have to take the next step in order to climb to the next level. And I think it's very intimidating when a lot of the people we see in general out in public are very successful, and it seems
Mm.
like they
Yeah,
just
and on social media.
exactly. And like you said, it took a long time. It didn't happen overnight. And so
Yeah.
I think really reflecting on where you started out and kind of the steps that you had to take in order to build the career that you have now is really helpful to hear. And everyone's going to have like a little bit of a different path, but a lot of these things that you're sharing and expressing, I think, are applicable to every person who's following their creative passion and wants to mix making a living and a business and a career with that passion. And so I think it's really admirable that you've been able to kind of do this process for so long and explore so many different aspects of the business. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate to do it, and love kind of paying forward any advice I can pay forward that I've gotten over the years from fellow musicians and mentors, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's one last category if you want to cover it, and that's writing charts.
Oh,
What's that like for you, and how did you kind of get started doing that part of the business?
I started like way back in the day. I used to be like really into salsa music. And
Hmm.
so and I played in salsa bands, and I would write some of the arrangements for the bands. Um, a lot of the bands, they would have like other arrangements, and some of them were good, but a lot of them were horrible. Like what we call chicken scratch. Like it's like really hard to read. Like it might be handwritten, and a lot of times like they would condense like an 8-minute song into one page, and you go here and then go back to the top and then go to the coda, then go back to the top, then go to the second coda, and everyone gets lost in the band. um, you have a train wreck like all the time, and I hated that, and so I just started feeling like I could do this. and make it more clear. And so
Right.
that's how I started doing it. And after a while, like I amassed like a number of songs. So I wrote down the list of songs and put it on my website. And I, like just had them like all these charts are for sale.
Mm.
And somehow people find, they might be like searching chart of uh, Como Candela or whatever song.
Hmm.
Um, and they would find my site and they'd reach out to me. And so they'd, buy an arrangement I had done.
Oh,
And then over
nice.
time, they would start commissioning like me to write other arrangements for them. After a while of doing that, though, I started freaking out like, I'm not really, I have no clue what the copyright law is on this or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I took it all down and stopped doing that. Um, didn't want it on the website. But yeah, just there's like a lot of my wife always jokes with me that like a lot of my living is just other musicians paying me, and there's just a lot of people I work with that have me write charts for them,
Yeah.
and yeah, so there's some projects that I've done for like various singers. Singers tend to need charts all the time.
Mm.
Um, some of them want me to write the arrangement exactly off of the recording. Some of them want me to put in more of an original spin on, like, all right, we want to do Blue Skies, but put your own spin on it. So I
Yeah.
might do that. I've also one of my favorite pianists out there is Fred Hirsch,
Hmm.
and like for fun, like I transcribe, or not just fun for learning, like I transcribe piano solos by not just Fred Hirsch but many pianists as well as trumpet players or any instrument. That's something we do a lot. Some people write it out, some people just listen and kind of memorize it. I've always written it out. And one day I saw Fred Hirsch play, and I like worked up the courage to go talk to him, and I told him like, hey, I've transcribed your songs, and suggested making a book of these transcriptions. And like a number of years later, he got back to me and he was like, yeah, I'd like that idea of you like putting together a book. And so like I ended up writing this whole book of transcriptions for him. And he introduced me to some singer who I've been working with, and the two of them
Hmm.
have done projects together. So relationships again.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
You mentioned posting these on your website, and maybe that's kind of where we can wrap things up. But
sure.
um, just in terms of marketing yourself and having an online presence and building mailing lists and ad campaigns and whatnot,
Hmm.
um, like you said, things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. But what are maybe a couple of things that you can share about the marketing aspect of being a musician?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, when I started, a lot of it was putting together going to Office Depot, buying a fancy folder and putting a CD in there, pressing the label on the CD, and, making your demo. As far as marketing now, though, you want to have like a good online presence, as you mentioned. So I think a website is an important thing. Another really, really important one is a mailing list.
Hmm.
And I've been adding to my mailing list ever since like around 2001 or so. I use MailChimp and just kind
Hmm.
of keep inputting names there. People can go on my website and input their name if they want to sign up as well.
Yeah, you're really
But that,
good at shows, bringing a physical, list and
oh yeah,
making
you've seen
making
that.
sure people sign up. Yeah, I think
I
that's great.
announce it every time. Get on
Yeah.
the email list. I put it out like once a month. It won't be too much of a hassle. You can get off of it if you want to.
Yeah.
Um, but that's like the most direct way to reach people is
Hmm.
on an email list. With Facebook and Instagram and whatever else you're on, you're at the mercy of the algorithm,
Yeah.
or you have to pay money to advertise.
Yeah.
Um, but if you can get people on your email list, it's definitely like a sure way to reach. Well, not sure. They could always delete your message, but I don't know. Usually, like 30 or 40% of people actually open up the emails, and
Yeah.
people come out if they're interested.
Yeah, it's a much higher percentage that you're going to reach at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I still, do the Facebook thing. I'm on YouTube. I try to put out content, but I'm an introvert, and when I'm on the road, like I get very good at like putting stuff out all the time and like saying, kind of sharing that experience. I
Hmm.
should do it more if I wanted to, but I don't know. Like I enjoy just kind of like doing my thing and not
Yeah.
trying to keep up with
Right.
putting stuff out there all the time.
For your
Um,
website, though, did you hire someone to build that or did you kind of use one
yes.
of the, okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
one of the owners of the label that I'm on does design,
Got it.
and I think he did a great job with it. And
Yeah.
he made it in a way where I can edit it. So, like, if I have new shows, I can add those shows. If I have new albums, I can put those on there. So,
Hmm.
runs itself.
Yeah.
I have another website for the group LP and the Vinyl,
Hmm.
and that one is through Bandzoogle, which is a web hosting platform,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like they have all sorts of templates, and they're pretty nice. So
Nice.
that's another easier option and
Do
cheaper.
you outsource any admin stuff, accounting, marketing? I know some of the label handles some of that stuff, or the label handles some of that stuff, but
Yeah.
are you allocating certain number of hours every day to answer emails and do admin stuff? Or are you able to like have a virtual assistant or somebody else help you
Mm.
with that?
I do it all. I don't do my taxes. I don't know how to do that. But,
Right.
like as far as the bookkeeping, I do that. As
Yeah.
far as emails, I do that. I do have Marion who handles a lot of the bookings now.
Yeah.
Um, but for
So,
like, that's like concert bookings out of
right.
town. But like for in-town stuff, I'm still doing most of those myself.
What about scheduling for your private lessons? What software are you using for that?
Calendar.
Old school.
Nothing.
I
Yeah,
love
just
it.
email, and usually like some students are on a weekly thing,
Yeah.
so at the end of the lesson, we just reconfirm. Some
Okay.
of them, like at the end of the lesson, we'll just figure out when do you want to get together next, and
Yeah.
I'll just put it in there. So,
And then you just send them like an invoice that you've created.
they not even. They
I
just
love it.
pay me on Venmo or on Zelle or Cash or whatever at the end.
Yeah.
So, and
I
yeah, I mean,
mean,
like, I have my spreadsheet. So one of my
right,
columns
right,
on my spreadsheet
right,
is pending. So if
right.
somebody hasn't paid me, like,
You go
I
after them.
yeah, I send my goons.
No, I think you are not in the minority when it comes to your processes, but I think everybody has like a mix of doing email or accounting or scheduling with all different types of complexity.
Yeah.
But maybe a better question is like, how do you divide your time, and what are your like personal systems to make sure that you're not letting that stuff get out of control, or that you're staying sane where you dedicate 1 or 2 hours a day, or how do you do your own personal energy allocation?
I don't have like a method that I stick to per se.
Uh-huh.
Um, Kind of like when I was talking about my teaching, how it might be uh, more just kind of on the fly.
Right, right.
That's kind of how I do everything.
Yeah,
And like I wake up early
yeah.
and tend to be very productive in the mornings. A lot of times, like I'll take the kids to school, come home, and maybe like practice piano for a while.
Hmm.
And then I get to the computer and see all my emails and kind of try to deal with them. And for a while, I've had chart writing to do like every day, basically,
Hmm.
for people. I just finished 3 big projects. And so now I got to figure out what to do with all my free time. Um,
But But I mean,
Yeah,
even
but
that in itself is a system where it sounds like you take care of your little morning routine where you're dropping your kids off and then you come home and practice. And then only until after that is when you start looking at email. Whereas, a lot of people will look at email the first thing, they do in the morning, and that kind of sets them down a whole
I might
different
look at
path.
it. Yeah, I might look at it, but
Okay. So, but you're not
like
doing anything
I
about
hate
it.
replying to emails on my phone, so
Yeah.
usually I'll wait till I get to the computer.
Yeah.
But I also do like being very quick. Like one of the reasons I work really well with my agent is because both of us, when it comes to communication, like if we ask a question, like we want to get the answer like very quickly.
Right.
And unless it doesn't seem like it needs to be answered immediately, like I try to get back to people fairly
Yeah.
fast. Sometimes I am like just all day long, like returning emails and
Yeah.
dealing with this and that. So it's sporadic.
Yeah.
It's all over.
Well, we've definitely covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything that, we missed that you wanted to add, or some words of wisdom to share with everyone tuning in?
Let's see. I think we really did cover quite a lot of it. I mean, I'm sure there's more.
Yeah.
There's things that I don't do, that people can think about.
I mean,
But
that's really important too. I think hearing about the systems that aren't in place, or there's
yeah,
certain areas where you kind of just go with the flow. we're
yeah.
all do
Or
we're all
I mean,
doing that.
I'm thinking
We're-
about like, for instance, like publishing and getting into like putting your music into catalogs for movies to use, or like I
yeah.
don't know a thing about. I know it's out
Right,
there.
right, right.
I know that it would take a lot to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
I just don't do it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's another avenue for people to explore if they want to explore that.
Hmm.
Um, there's like the whole festival circuit. That's an avenue. There's so many avenues.
Yeah. And kind of the intersection of all these things now. I think I mean I shared that YouTube video with you, but there's so many ways to integrate music into other fields, whether that's technology or design or education, where
Hmm.
the music isn't the primary focus, but it is either complementary or an ancillary part of, say, some type of educational program that utilizes music in a way to convey other information. So I think the more creative you can get at the intersection of these different fields will provide all these different potentials for you to earn money and
Hmm.
create a career, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you sent me the Patreon thing yesterday. That's like a
Yeah.
whole other one. Like just being a content creator. Like
Hmm.
some people do really well doing that,
Yeah.
and I it's just another thing I haven't really pursued that
Yeah.
much. But I think if I had to say one like main overarching piece of advice or two, um, first and foremost, at least in music, it's about your craft and just
Hmm.
developing your artistry, getting good on your instrument, and being open to outside influences, and just coming up with your own unique way to like kind of be irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Like if you could put something out that nobody else has, then you become of value to other people.
Hmm.
So I think that's like the most important thing, just getting good at that, and
Yeah.
the other stuff falls into place.
Great.
Yeah,
All right.
just to make it
Well,
happen. But
yeah. Thank
yeah,
you so much, Danny. I thought that was a really fun conversation. So I appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for having
Yeah.
me again.
Cool.